You're listening to A Radio.
Landing ground.
Thank you for joining us. You are listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We're on weekdays, 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. I was going to do a completely different piece today, but I decided yet again to hammer home the comment I made to you some considerable time ago, first of all, and then recently, quite recently again. It is the fact of press independence, not the fact that we in the West are supposed to have free press, which certainly implies impartiality, but fairness. Now, the reason I bring this up is that I grew up in the UK, and while I was growing up, I was under the impression that there were certain types of media that took a certain slant on things, and that was well known. And then there was the satirical ones that took jabs at both sides. Then there was the more serious ones that looked at the issues. But as I grew older, I began to realise something was wrong. I think I first noticed this in connection with Northern Ireland. Now, the example I cite brings to the attention of my American friends something they may not have heard about, but it's well known in the world of television, radio and press in the UK. It's something that probably is unthinkable in a so-called free press. It's something called a D notice, which stands for do not print, which means what it says in old-fashioned terms. But in a more modern environment, it's meant to mean do not play or do not show. This D notice was applied and issued to a person named Gerry Adams. Now, for those of you who didn't know or don't know, he was a top member at the time of the IRA. Well, the British government thought he was. He denied it, but he was. Who are still fighting today, but politically rather than, at the time, militarily. Their goal was reunification of the island of Ireland, using whatever means they needed, which meant bombs in Britain being set off and attacks on the army in Northern Ireland who were trying to keep peace. That's the British perspective. The crux of the matter was that somehow TV lawyers got round the D notice, showing Gerry Adams on TV, but with no sound. A ludicrous situation. He was being interviewed, I believe, at the time on American TV in the United States. We could see him in the UK. We could see his lips moving, but we were not allowed to hear his voice. We did in fact get a transcript, somebody reading what he said. A crazy, crazy situation which made a mockery, in my mind, of freedom in the UK. Agree with a guy or not agree with a guy, we have the right to hear what he has to say, even if we disagree with him. That's what freedom is. That's what free speech is. That really woke me up. And that was way before this so-called hate speech has gone like a whirlwind around the world. What really woke me up is that was the Conservative government issuing a D notice. That shook me up. Now, fast forward to today, where the media has slid more and more into politics, rather than trying to remain independent and impartial. I cite the country of Canada. Today we face a situation in Canada where the media is virtually all left-leaning. The result of that was clear to be seen in our last election, where our Prime Minister clearly broke the law and was interfering with a legal issue, even going as far as to fire the Attorney General because she refused not to prosecute in the case which was clearly against the wishes of the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. She wanted to prosecute, he didn't want to. This company that was in the wrong was based in Quebec. Quebec being the province the Prime Minister comes from. This should have taken down the government. If it had been a Conservative government, it would have done, as the media would have hounded the government every single day. Yes, to be fair, they did comment, but there was no demand from the media to resign, call an immediate general election. No, it just went on and on and on, and the cover-up continued. Further to that, when the general election was finally announced, they did nothing to promote the fact that the Prime Minister acted inappropriately, at best, and more likely illegally. Nothing happened. If it had been a Conservative Prime Minister, it would have been handled very differently. Finally, I give you the Canadian blackface incident. Nothing happened. Nothing happened to Trudeau at all. He skates. He skates away yet again. I have to point out that if it had been a Conservative caught in that predicament, he would have been literally tarred and feathered every day and forced to resign, costing that party the election. There is in Canada a clear double standard operating for Liberals and in particular Trudeau. They and he can do no wrong. Whatever happened to the role of independent journalist who was there to seek the truth wherever it may lead? No, now I turn my attention to US politics once again, for two reasons. US politics has taken a very, in my mind, disturbing turn towards the undesirable. There was a time when the mainstream media could be relied upon to be the last port of call on the road to insanity. It was always believed that the US media could be relied upon to ask those questions other media organisations were scared to ask their country's leaders. It wasn't until their country's leaders came to the United States and had a press conference with the president that they got called out on issues in their own country, because their journalists were scared to ask those questions. You could rely on XYZ to be the bulldogs seeking the truth, fiercely independent. For me, these things changed while I was in the US working, prior to the election of then-candidate Barack Hussein Obama. I noticed a distinct sea change. It all started with their collective unwillingness to investigate Obama's history, his education, where he came from, his background, his connections to radical groups in Chicago, and even the rumours about his questionable citizenship. Remember those? Didn't hear much about that on mainstream media, did you? All of this was either ignored or covered up when the anointing of the guy took place by such well-known commentators as Tom Brokaw. Remember that? At the time, rather than taking an investigative approach. It was clear to me and many others that something had changed, and changed it had, all through the long, slow, managed decline of the US economy, overseen by this president, some say with barely a whimper from the media. A lot of people were disturbed by the lack of willingness to question the policies being put in place, even to the extent of defending the president's actions, attacking lawful police actions. Remember that? This led to inevitable civil unrest and the increased hatred of the police that the mainstream media seemed to be fomenting. Now, fast forward, if you will, again to the 2016 presidential election and President Trump, who I believed was a direct reaction by the American population by the forced onset of socialism by Barack Hussein Obama. They didn't want this, but clearly many politicians were okay with it, along with the mainstream media, who saw their way into controlling what politicians said and did. So now we see a president who works for the people of the United States, not the interests of big business alone, but for Americans. It was clear from day one of his presidency that these politicians, along with the mainstream media, were bound and determined to do all in their power to bring this president to heel and bring him into line or force him out of office by any means necessary. I call that a coup on a duly elected president. And they said it openly. You heard it time and time again. They were open about it. Now you see the result of their actions. Even up to the point of me writing this, these turncoats in the Senate, who are supposedly part of the president's party, are plotting to undermine him. The next few weeks, I think, will see the very fight for democracy and justice fought for in the illustrious building known as the Senate of the United States. Make no mistake, the Democrat goal, which they stated openly from day one of President Trump's presidency, was to impeach him. They cared and they care nothing for the will of the American people. The mainstream media, both home in the United States and have sought quite successfully, I might add, to muddy the water, nationally and internationally, to create the impression of an incompetent, if not dangerous and out of control presidency, all because their anointed candidate did not win. In a previous podcast, I mentioned in great detail how Project Blue, the Democrats and mainstream media, plotted from day one to undermine this administration. This is their last roll of the dice, so to speak. If they fail here, the Democrats will fold like a pack of cards, along with the mainstream media. At stake is nothing less than the rule of law applied equally to all, and freedom itself. If they succeed, then everything changes, including the US Constitution, and that has ramifications far outside the United States. So yes, this is our business. We are concerned that a duly elected president is forced out by false and fake information. If this can happen in the land of the free and the home of the brave, it can certainly happen where you are. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Spotify, and email. We're on Spotify under the podcast section. Type in Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio, EHRADIO, A-Radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern, and tell your friends and pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the mainstream media want you to know.